Da vil klokka kvart over, og med lightning talk så må vi være veldig sharpe på tid, ellers kommer det til å gå langt over, så da begynner vi. So I'm going to speak in English though. So hello, mobile era. My name is Benedicte and I'm a full stack developer from right here in Oslo. Please feel free to tweet, Insta, or whatever you feel like. Pictures do not have to be approved by me. And I'm saying this because when you start talking about privacy, it seems people will be very scared about sharing information or pictures of you. Go figure. So a privacy-first period tracker, is it even possible? And I would say, yes, it is. And how do I know? Well, I actually started making one. And if all goes according to plan, it will launch March 8th, otherwise known as the International Women's Day. Through my research, I realized that end-to-end encryption has to be the foundation that privacy-first apps are built upon. And going forward, I will probably title this talk, A Privacy-First Period Tracker, Encryption is Key. With end-to-end encryption, all encryption and decryption happens on your user's devices. The idea is that you, as a developer or anyone else that get access to the data, will not be able to decrypt and read the data. It might seem like a simple or small idea, but it has some large implications both for you as a developer and our users. And my goal with this short talk is to encourage you and excite you about encryption so that you might incorporate it into your next side project. But before we talk more about encryption, I want to answer that nagging thought that I know that you have on your mind because it has been asked after this talk before. But Benedicte, why are you such a prude? Why do you care if people know when you're next menstruating? Well, let me start by informing you that these apps ask you to log so much more than actually when you menstruate. They ask you to log if you're feeling excited, tired, anxious, horny, the quality and quantity of your sex life, and if you remember to use protection, and so much more. So for me, this journey started when I was looking for simpler tools. The level of detail just made me stop using the apps, and it also felt creepy, even a little invasive. And it turned out my intuition was right. In February, the Wall Street Journal came out with a report that a lot of health apps and period trackers included were sharing or leaking their data to Facebook Analytics. Then this September, BuzzFeed broke the news that some of these apps are actually selling their data as their business model. So no wonder they want you to be so specific. They actually, they want to do something with your data. And then again, just this week, fell asleep. Well, let's see. I don't know why it's falling asleep, though. Okay. I could probably stand over here because I have to read some of my notes anyway. And then again, this week, an Australian journalist told the world about her experience when her internet life turned into a nightmare of smiling mothers and babies after forgetting to log her cycle. Her app has concluded that she had to be pregnant and let third parties in on this secret that she herself did not know. After logging her cycle, the ad stopped. But for me, this is not what kicked it into gear for me. It was this reassuring email I got from Clue. It stated, only few people have access to the tools we use to look into the database. And theoretically, I've always known as a developer that most of the data we save at some point is clear data or in clear text, but consumer Benedicte has just been willingly ignorant. Because knowing too much as a consumer just sometimes is very damn exhausting. And that developer with access could be one of my friends, since I am a developer. It could be one of you sitting here, and it could be me. And the thing is, Clue is like one of the good ones. So they shared their data with people who want to do research into female health. So I have no reason to believe that Clue will be reckless with my data, but that email just drove home the point that they could if they wanted to. I will have to trust that they will never use my data in a bad way. And I guess this week, Google bought one of the fitness trackers, and suddenly Google now has access to all that data, and many people are feeling a little anxious about that. So I decided that if I was ever going to make that period tracker that was on my mind, I would need to learn how to shield myself from being able to spy on my users. And you might still think, you prude, I don't mind if someone gets access to this data about me. And that is okay. I mean, you do you. You should be allowed to choose what is private to you. But others should have the option to choose what is private to them and make informed choices. And for us living in a country with worker rights and reproductive rights, we could sometimes, we could think about menstruators in other countries, because I can imagine a scenario where this information could get you fired because you're trying to get pregnant, or even land you in jail for an illegal abortion. So, with this in mind, let's talk encryption in a modern web application. So as a student and later as a developer, my attitude towards encryption has been one of wonder and awe. It's like, wow, these people have to be really, really smart. And I'm still in awe for the people making encryption algorithms. I've read it takes around 20 years of education and work experience before you're allowed to make your own algorithms. But luckily for us JavaScript developers, we can rely on the Web Crypto API available in the modern web browsers of today. You can trust the math and use it as you would any other API or SDK. I will use terms and words that match the Web Crypto API, but in this talk we're not looking at code examples, we'll look at diagrams. So a basic encryption algorithm takes two inputs. It takes the key and the content you would like to encrypt. And the content is usually called plain text, and then the outputted scrambled version that you can't read is called ciphertext. So this is to get you familiar with the words they use in documentation you might be finding later. So we encrypt by taking the plain text and the key, and then we decrypt again by taking the ciphertext and the key. A way to think about encryption and decryption is how we secure our belongings by locking them inside our houses. Only someone with the correct key can lock the door and secure the belongings, and only someone with the correct key can open the door again to gain access to the belongings. The big difference is that with encryption, there is no longer any belongings. They would have been transformed into something unrecognizable when you lock the door and then turn back again when you decrypt. And this was just a little thing that got me in the beginning. Another thing was this key, this magical key. They talk about keys, and it's also usually always depicted as a physical key, like I did in my diagram. And it turns out that basically they're just very, very long random sequences of characters. And for different algorithms, there are some different properties, but in the broader sense, it's just a very long random sequence of character. And it turns out this is a really big deal in cryptography, because if a key is easy to encrypt, it's easy to guess, and the whole thing kind of falls apart. So it's got its own word, entropy. So you won't see them saying, oh, a key that's very, very long. In documentation, it would be a high entropy password or key or something like that. And it just tells you high entropy is something that is hard to guess, and low entropy is something that is easy to guess. And if you're a JavaScript developer and you're like, well, I know how to make random things because I can use math random, then I'm very sorry to say that that's what we call a pseudo-random algorithm, and it will not give us what we need for encryption. It has to be I can't even say the words, cryptographically strong random values. So to sum up, we generate the key here in red, and we encrypt our plain text, and we can then save our ciphertext somewhere in the cloud. And then we get the ciphertext back, and we have the key stored on the user devices, and then we can decrypt it again. And for many apps, this is a valid approach. So to be able to decrypt from a new device, you would have to manually move the key. But the challenge for this with the period tracker is that many of my probable users could share devices with people, and they don't want other people in the household to have access to the data, or they don't trust the people in their household, or someone might gain access to their private device. So I looked to 1Password, which is the password manager that I use and that I fell even more in love with when I was researching, because they have a commitment to transparency, and had I not found this white paper by Jeffrey Goldberg, I think maybe I would have given up, because it's really hard to find noob-friendly content around encryption. It's very much kind of like, this is a hard subject matter, and we're going to use all the hard words, and you need a degree in math before you're allowed to touch these things. So from that, I learned that instead of generating a key, we can derive a key. So what's the difference? When we generate a key, the function will generate a new key every time, but when we derive a key, if we provide the same input, it will create the same key every time. And in our case, we then want the input to be a user-selected password. But as we talked about, users cannot be trusted to make truly random choices for their passwords. So the algorithm also asks us to provide cryptographically safe salt. So the diagram doesn't change much, but let's look at where we store things. So we still store the ciphertext. We can still store the ciphertext in the cloud. The password in the user's mind, or hopefully in the password manager, if you're not making a password manager, that is. And the salt is stored on the device the same way we would have done with the key earlier. Yeah, and as earlier, if you want to then gain access to this ciphertext from a new device, you need to manually transfer the salt, and then you type in your password like you normally would. So how does this play out in our house analogy? Oh, I have little time left. With the generated key, then you have that in your pocket and you have access to your house, but somebody can steal the key and they will have access to your house. So you decide to get one of these key boxes that we now have for Airbnb, where you put the key in there and then there's a code. And then if you keep that code safe, you're keeping the key safe. But people could probably guess that code or spy on you when you type it in. So you get one of these new boxes that I guess are not existing, but where there's both a code and a physical key. So to get the key to your house, you need to know the code, and you need to have that key. So adding security often comes with the cost of usability, and I think 1Password does a really good job of explaining and helping the users to feel as little pain around this as possible. As you see, they call the salt a secret key to make it clear that it should remain the secret. There is a QR option, so you can easily add devices that have a camera. And the users, as we said, would still have to manually transfer. And so when you set up 1Password on a new device, you transfer the secret key, and then you're good to go. And they also tell you to print out this emergency kit with the secret key and the password, because with these kinds of encrypted applications, there is no password recovery. That little nice link that says "forgot my password" will not work because nobody has your password, and you can't reset the password. So, but even if they nudge you to do it along the way, they report not many people do it. And I hope that with the increased focus that we have on privacy and also the increase in privacy-first applications, our users' models start to change, where they maybe in the end kind of question whoa, this app has a password recovery function. Well, then my data is obviously not encrypted, and I should not share things here that I don't want anybody else to figure out. So with that, I'll start wrapping up. As you might have noticed, we've skipped a lot of things. We've skipped authentication, and it has its own unique challenges with privacy-first encrypted apps. We've also skipped logging and debugging. How can we do that and still look after our users' privacy? So there might be new talks in the future. I'll be here for the rest of the day and parts of tomorrow, so please feel free to come and talk to me about any of these topics or anything else. Today I'll be here with my daughter, and we like to get to know new people. And again, if you want to see these slides or get into contact with me, this is the site to go to. And with that, thank you for listening. And I want to thank Lillian for making the props for these slides.